All right, welcome to the podcast on
Fighting for
the
secret battle.
The secret battle.
When you put us on that spot, suddenly we go blank.
What do we do? What to say?
They do not know the topic.
But we're talking.
First of all, I'd just like to thank all our viewers and people who have been responding to our pigeonhole and the questions that you asked. You've really been helpful in that way, and thank you so much even for the previous podcast of preparing for marriage. A lot of you have actually asked questions, sent us emails. Some of them have connected face to face, had calls, right? And that's our ultimate motive, okay? That at least if one person benefits from this, turns away their life from sin, that's good enough, right? A particular verse that often reminded me is James. If you turn to James, the last verse of James, and this is a motivation, it has been my motivation for a very long time, and I think it will continue to be my motivation.
Let him know that he who turns a sinner from the error of his way will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins.
Yeah. So if we can, if through this podcast, if we can change one person, I think our job and our money and our time and resources all is paid for, right? And for me, that is enough, right? Because I know how difficult this was a problem for me, and this has changed my life, right? It has allowed me to work better, more efficient in a lot of ways. So thank you so much for those who have helped us in this. So we're going to talk about how pornography is actually, it has an addictive cycle also. But on the onset of it, can I ask what is an addiction you have struggled with, right? For me, it has been pornography, yes. Food has been another addiction at some level, you can say. So I just leave the floor for you guys.
Man, I have to think of a new one. You took away from both of mine now. Yeah, but
you can repeat it.
I'm going to take his.
So, okay, I'm going to jump in first.
Good.
I was saying it is still procrastination. I'll do it. I get all the adrenaline boost at the last moment. Even for maybe preparing for this, you told long back, but still I would prefer only one day ahead. So that has been a big issue with me.
Yes.
Leaving things for the last.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether to call it an addiction as such. And then definitely food too. Wherever I see a new place, I have to go and find that place. I have to try it out. Yeah.
I think that's maybe one topic that we will talk about, like gluttony.
Yes.
It's not talked about a lot, and with all this.
No, I don't have gluttony. Okay.
No, I'm not telling you have.
No, that's it. See,
Accusations.
we all keep saying, no, that's not mine.
Yeah.
That's somebody else's.
Yes.
No, don't use the big word against me. Okay, so it's true.
Yeah. So.
Over to you. The spotlight is on you.
Yep. So I think actually, as you guys were talking, I was realizing that I have that. I have that too. Although initially I was going to say that I struggled with pornography, and it was not easy. Still walking and walking in freedom, right? And had a lot of people to help me out also to get through this. But I think the biggest struggle I've had was with pornography for sure. So
Yeah. It's interesting. You had something.
Yeah, so when you mentioned procrastination, I was reminded of this. One of the factors that causes that for me, I struggle with the same problem too, and it's called revenge bedtime procrastination.
Oh wow!
What this is that
Given names, no.
I'm going to read the definition out. It puts it very well. Revenge bedtime procrastination describes the decision to sacrifice sleep for leisure time that is driven by a daily schedule lacking in free time.
True.
And so our body goes against its norm of seeking rest to push our body further.
Yes.
Just in thinking that I don't find time
Are
for
you telling
myself.
you all will push today?
I want to change my answer to that because that's true.
Seriously, I mean, we feel so sleepy by 12, but still get up in the middle of the night, make an omelette, come back, make yourself awake.
Yeah.
Again,
I think only you do that kind of
No, but it's funny you
no,
should mention.
people eat.
Yeah,
they
people
cook
eat. Yeah.
just so that they don't feel sleepy.
Yeah.
And then again they drag their day out
Yeah.
and make sure by 2 or 3 only they will sleep. It's like I will sleep only at that time.
And the next day morning, there's an instant regret of, man, this is not going to happen tonight because I don't feel energetic enough. And then the night it's the same story.
That's
So this
interesting.
is,
actually.
I think,
It's there for all. I mean, addiction is.
We're facing a lot of different things, and actually it's interesting. I'm only being aware of this right now. I've never heard of this before.
But it's being practiced.
It's been practiced, exactly. We're so ignorant, right?
yeah. Anyway, so our main subject is pornography and the addiction of and pornography and things dealing with pornography. So today we're going to kind of talk about how it is. It's also addictive, right? The impact of it on the brain. I think we talked about a little about the feel-good hormones of dopamine and oxytocin and all those kind of things, endorphins. So the impact of it on the brain is almost, they say, is almost the same as how it impacts other addictions, right? Even it's almost substance, right? And your dependency is increasing, your tolerance is changed, right? And your brain is wired. You know, we talk about brain plasticity, right? And your brain is continuously wired in certain ways, right? And now the good thing is that your brain can be changed, right? The wiring can be changed, but it takes time, right? So this is an addiction, and we should, one thing that we say to check if it's an addiction or not is 3. It's called the Schaeffer's criteria. One is whether it's a recurrent or a compulsive behavior, right? That is one. Number 2, you continue to do it
Even
despite
knowing the consequences.
despite negative consequences or adverse consequences. You continue to do it. And the third is your life is out of control or losing control in some sense, right? And so if you're thinking that it's not an addiction for you, this is maybe some criteria that you can check, right?
And another one I think you can add to that is like how once you try stopping it, you can't stop it.
Yes.
There are withdrawal problems.
Yes.
Like maybe shakes, shivers, headaches, physical issues itself
there
can
is, for sure.
take place. So that is the way you feel so agitated, you feel so incomplete, and also anger when it is taken away.
Yeah, and sometimes it's also, you might be able to stop it for a few days or weeks, right?
True.
But if you want to get a behavior, like change in behavior, it's sometimes we say 21 days.
21 days.
But it's actually not 21 days.
It goes to 90 days.
Yeah, in the addiction cycle is on the to get really away from it, we should prove 90 days. 90 days, and to get over those,
The urges?
The urges and all that, flashes, people get flashes even after stopping 90 days. It would sometimes take 3 years, right? And sometimes, people really say, do we really
Get out of
it? Like those temptations or, that the cravings, right? Actually, you do.
Yes.
You do get out of the cravings. You can get out of the cravings. It'll take time, but you can, right? And
you are desensitized to the trigger.
Yes. Yeah.
The otherwise was we are desensitized to the normality.
Yeah.
But now you are desensitized to the trigger aspect itself. We're like, okay, fine, big deal.
Yeah.
Like that way itself, it can reach. But again, I was talking in the previous episode about something known as the porn circuit, in which there are tattooing which is taking place almost in the brain. So it's like these vivid images can just come as a flash years later. You completely remove off the memory channel to not to remember or to unremember is almost an impossibility, they say, with porn especially. Because of the sexual intimacy part. Because there is a natural aspect to it. Like for example, smoking, there is nothing natural about it. Like alcohol, there is nothing natural about it. But this, there is a natural component, that is the sexual intimacy which God had planned, is there. Now there is now you're duplicating that. So that has got some long-term effects.
Yeah.
In fact,
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, there's a verse, right, on this 1 Corinthians chapter 6.
I was going to take the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Every other sin is outside
Yes,
the body.
that's it. 1 Corinthians 6 was 18, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the sin of
Sexual immorality is
immorality.
against your own body.
I'll
Yeah.
read it.
I mean, this is talking about sexual immorality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
go
No,
ahead.
yeah.
Run from sexual sin. No other sin so clearly affects the body as
No.
this one does. For sexual immorality is a sin against your own body.
Yes.
That's verse 18.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what
So
it
this is in some ways it's body and physical sexual morality. But when you talk about pornography, it's your like you said, your mind, your
emotionally attached. Oxytocin.
Yeah.
The various other. And
Yeah.
interesting, when we are talking about that, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1-2, it talks, be imitators of God as beloved children. Walk in love just as Christ also loved you, gave himself for us, an offering. The third verse is totally out of context. But immorality or impurity or greed must not even be named among you, as is improper among saints. You're talking of the love of God and then bringing in the fake love also. The immorality aspect, the pseudo intimacy, the pseudo love. So it's a competition.
Yeah.
That's why this pornography is so dangerous because of that. Because it's a pseudo of something real.
Yeah.
And it is destroying the real and making the pseudo look real.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a big danger.
Yeah. So one other thing I want to bring is about the cycle of addiction.
Yeah.
Right.
Before we get there, I have a question for you. So, and this is probably, I mean, this is still taking time for me to probably comprehend as to how I deal with. So I know what attitude I'm supposed to have, and I am battling it. But and I'm successful in, let's say, the 90 days. But what if I fall in the period, the 3 years that you were talking about, or at any point, right? In my battle with it is real, and I know it's real. But what if I do fall for it?
It's interesting you say that. So we talk about in addiction, we talk about a lapse and a relapse. Okay, lapse is one.
It's a time.
Relapse is something. Lapse is also called a slip, right? So lapse is a one-time event that happened, and you realize it, and then you immediately realize and get out of it, right? But a relapse is I relapsed, and we'll talk about in the addiction cycle. You kind of relapse, and then you're like, oh, I'm already into it, and then you just go. So there's a lot of people who say, okay, you know what? For 1 month I did not use porn, right? But suddenly again the next 1 week I'm using continuously. Then the realization, I have used porn. Then I again stay away 1 month. But that is not a sense victory, because you're relapsing often, right? So if it's a lapse, it's a one-time event, and you realize, oh gosh, I shouldn't have been doing this, and I kind of get out of it, right? Which we shouldn't have too many lapses. I'm not saying I'm advocating for lapses, but it's a slip, right? And let's also remember, even though we are trying to get out of this, right? One of the biggest questions people ask is, can you really overcome it fully? Yes, you can overcome it fully, right? But there are other people who might have a lapse in the beginning when they're gaining freedom to this, right? They might have slips, right? But if it's a relapse, that means it's a continuous usage of it, right? So technically you are not kind of come out of it, right? So you like.
Yeah, I just want to add.
Yeah.
In John chapter 15 and verse 5, it says, I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Okay, so again, when we talk about the relapse, the fall, and all that, maybe that's a juncture to ask, how's your spiritual life?
Yeah.
That is a juncture maybe to how's your personal. Maybe you're going through the motions. Okay, maybe you're attending church, you're having a quiet time, you're doing all that. But that personal relationship, that love, and doing it for the love of God constraineth me, right? Maybe there's something happened there. Okay, maybe that first place which you are given, maybe through your work, maybe through your family, maybe through something else that slowly has slipped down. Maybe like we say, we take insulin to prevent that sugar surge. That's why we say have it before food. Okay, in the same way, maybe that covering or the ozone layer, okay, that covering of relationship with Christ and not wanting to hurt him, not wanting to quench the spirit, that somehow got a leak.
Yeah.
Okay, that is where maybe this thing crept up.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we always say about removing an addiction, it's always filling it up with something else.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't have an addiction removed with nothing else filling up.
Yeah.
We have that parable which Jesus Christ himself says, in which there was a devil who lives that house and comes back with 7 more stronger ones.
Yeah.
So this relapse is a dangerous one in which the person can feel totally lost.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about it more. Like I think in the next episode we'll talk about it.
Okay, yeah.
Wait. We have. I think we'll come back to that. But I think it's dangerous, and I think I like the point that you said. Like what is one thing about lapse or slip is often I ask people is, or I've asked myself is, what is something that, what is a trigger, or what is something that was missing? So it often can be our own spiritual life, right? We are not walking with the Lord continuously, or at some point it kind of, or not active in our relationship with Christ, right? And that's often a very, very important thing.
When you were talking about addiction cycle, what did you actually wanted to say, that how is that spiraling taking place?
See, I just share a picture, and I think most of you will be able to see it. So we talk about this addiction cycle. We talk about a preoccupation. Start with a preoccupation of your thinking, and then you're preoccupied.
You can say the initial exposure is there, which could be accidental.
Yeah,
which could be curiosity, which could be a friend or something.
Yeah.
From there you go to that. You're saying something.
Oh, you're talking about how it spirals down.
Yeah. No. You're saying
The addiction,
initial.
Yeah. So there's a preoccupation, right? It could be your loneliness. It could be your shame. It could be something else, right? And then you start thinking. So you have an impaired thinking, right? Now, whenever you act out in respect to pornography, you don't just, you kind of plan it out, right? That's the impaired thinking. Like for example, today morning you might think, get up and think, okay, today evening at this time I'll be alone, or today after I finish my work, or after I come back from college, or and there is a planning out that happens. There's impaired thinking, right? And then a ritualistic behavior, right? Some people have ritual, like for example, they will close the door, or they will, there's a ritualistic behavior. In all addictions there's some ritualistic behavior, and then there is acting out, right? You watch pornography, you masturbate, or you think wrong, right? And that's you see, after all these things is when this particular acting out comes up, right? And after this addictive cycle, after this acting out, is when you have this shame and despair, right? Last shame and despair, where you like, oh, I did this, I shouldn't have done it. What would God think of me? Will He forgive me? And people actually say during this time is also when, even with pornography, sometimes people think of suicide during these times. Right? People are in this addiction, they think,
they have a low self-esteem many times.
Yeah. And then what happens is, in this shame and despair, you kind of go back. You kind of go back, right? Why I'm explaining all this is because there's another diagram that I'll just show, and this is from one of the books. Okay, I think it's from the Fight the New Drug, and it talks about at each point you have a choice point, right? If you look at that. Before you're acting out, before thinking, before your ritualistic behavior, and even after acting out, before you reach the shame and despair, or after the shame and despair, you have a choice point. We all have choice points, right? You can stop and decide. Should I continue? Should I not? Right? There are many times I remember I've thought about it. I have come to the ritualistic behavior, right? It could be even going to the incognito mode, right? Or all that kind of things, right? That could be ritual. And I have come and I've opened my browser and I've typed the site that I want to go, and I've stopped.
Yeah.
This is really what I want to do. Choice point. I have a choice point, right? There are other times when the choice point was at the thought level, right? And this is something that I really encourage a lot of people to do. Fight it at the thought level. Fight every thought. There is one verse that I often use. 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 3 to 6, right? We won't read everything, but it says, verse 5 it says, 2 Corinthians 10:5 says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to make it obedient to God. Now, when you say make every thought captive, you take the thought and you put it in jail literally and check and say, is this going to be obedient to God or disobedient to God, right? And I think in the car you were discussing, right, that ultimately Satan, we have all this knowledge and all comes, but obedience is something you were saying.
Yeah. So very interesting you should bring that up. Recently I was convicted of this in a conversation where Satan in fact wants us as believers to know the word of God, to enjoy it and to feel like Christians. But it has a problem. But it has a problem with obedience. When we start walking the talk is when
The challenge comes.
is when the war is on.
In fact, we can listen to this particular podcast. Like, wow, like so much I know. But if we are not acting in obedience to the Lord in terms of the word of God and setting ourselves away from this kind of an act, then the battle is won, right? Like for Satan, his battle is won, right? So making every thought captive. In fact, Ted Roberts in his book, I think Pure Desire. I read that book. Very, very insightful book. He says our biggest sexual organ
is the brain.
Is our brain, right? I don't want to ask as a quiz, but
Hey, the doctor gave his validation. I would have said skin. But he said brain, so it's good enough.
So even in our thought, right? So that first thought, that preoccupation, right? If we can fight it at that, because many times we start with that thought and we allow it to linger throughout the day or maybe week, and then we act out, right? And for me, it ultimately it'll come to that. It'll come to the thought level. You have to fight any addiction at the thought level, right? When that first thought comes, to stop wherever you are and say, Lord, I have a choice now. I don't want to continue this. That temptation is there. I want to stop it, right?
Along with that, because I used to bring out something like pick and plant. Okay, you pluck and plant. Or pick. Pluck out the weeds and plant something else there. Okay, like for example, when we just say, God, please help me to get out of this, you need something else to fill in there.
Yes.
Okay, maybe you go wash your car, or maybe you go for a walk, or something else there, or talk to a family member, pick up the phone, call up somebody. Something else needs to be done there, or do a project work there, do some pet topic of yours, something like that. So just plucking may not work, but fill it up with some pick and plant.
It's interesting. There are many times when I've sat like that at home, and then temptation comes, and I prayed, and I know God has given away me a thing, but then I get out of the house.
I was going to say, run away from privacy.
That's
the best way.
In some ways, Google is doing a good job for that sense, but okay.
Like, I remember walking into my friend's room, hey, what's up, what's happening? Like, why are you here? Like, no, I'm just simply here. Like,
having a big struggle
in
back
hostels, I think that's very much more easier. Those who are watching us, or those who are having a hostel life, or something of that sort.
So that's very interesting, right? Like, you can fight at the thought level. And you can, so every point you have a choice point. You can choose in the addictive cycle, you can choose to get out of it, right? So my encouragement to a lot of people is fight at the thought level. Start learning to fight at the thought level. Don't allow it to come to the ritualistic behavior or come to the acting out and then go to the shame and despair. Even the shame and despair, I think last episode we talked about how the Lord has forgiven us, right? And I think that's something that I took a very long time to understand. I reached a point in my life where I said, Lord, you know what? This battle is so big. I don't want you to forgive me. Let me deal. Let me deal with this. Let me get out of it, and then I'll come back to you. But that's the most stupidest thing I've done in my life, right? For me to do that took me away from God. But God every time wants us to come back, right? Even 100 times you fall, He wants you to come back, right? You know, and that verse that come to me all who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest, right? And He said, come, just come to me, right? And even the prodigal son, he just had to come back.
I was thinking the same thing. The prodigal son is like perfect example for this.
He had to just come back, right? And so just come back to Him, right? Forget we talk about guilt, and we don't have to live in that guilt. In fact, grace, right? Grace is unmerited favor. And we will never understand grace. because we are not so gracious.
Yeah.
Right? We can never understand. But God is the ultimate, Christ is the ultimate expression of that grace that He offers to us.
Correct.
Right? We don't continue to sin.
Yeah.
Like Romans says, continue to sin that grace may abound. But we have to realize that there is grace. Right? We don't have to, because I've realized this, a lot of people they struggle with this guilt and the shame and despair, and they just go back to that cycle. Right?
Yeah. So
In
what?
fact,
Yeah.
go on.
So actually about that, so guilt was something even I struggled with quite a bit. And that same statement you made, God, I will fix this,
Then
and then come back to you. You know, that's like you're deceiving yourself. Don't do that. And I think that came because, in some sense, I didn't know who God actually was. Because I didn't perceive Him to be such a gracious God.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I will work it out and I'll come back. Prodigal son, right? The prodigal son would have actually been thinking.
He already had planned out everything. What to
Yeah,
say, what
he
to do.
wanted to say, everything. He had a speech ready.
Yeah.
And he came, stood in front of the father, and he didn't even complete the speech.
Yeah.
The father saw him and he just had compassion.
Yeah.
He didn't look at him and say, hey, I told you so. He didn't look at him and he didn't condemn him. He just hugged him.
Yeah.
He accepted him back. He showed compassion.
And He can do that because of the cross work, right?
Yes.
Like when
Yeah,
we
that's-
come with the sin,
Yeah, exactly.
right? God does not look at our sin because the blood is taking care of it, right? And that's so powerful. I think for me, every time Christ's blood covers my sin. Like last Sunday, I was talking about in our church. Though our sins are like crimson,
Scarlet.
red like
Red
crimson,
like-
but He's made us
White
white,
as-
right? And to get a clean slate is like everyone needs a new, fresh start.
Yeah.
Right? And God has given us that, right? And we can come back to Him, but not habitually sinning and coming back,
Yeah.
right? But making impact
Through
of
repentance.
change, right? Through repentance, yeah.
In that context of that habitual sin,
Uh-huh.
I was thinking many born again people, baptized people take part in the bread and wine, right? And there's a verse in the Bible which says, like, if you take part of it, like, but a man examine himself, we know that. For he eats and drinks judgment, okay? And for this reason, many among you are weak and sick, and a number sleep. Okay, I used to think, what is a weak and sick? Weak and sick. What do you mean by that? So that means there's something else there. So I was reading a book somewhere. They said weak. We are talking about spiritual weakness. Okay. The sickness is physical sickness, and death is death. Okay. Saying that the spiritual weakness is what happens when you go into pornography or secret sins, come back to church, you pray every Sunday morning, oh God, please forgive me, this week was very bad, I committed all these sins, please forgive me, Lord, I'm going to take this bread and wine, don't condemn me, don't judge me, don't punish me, please forgive me of all my sins. And then what happens? You take it. Then till Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're okay. Okay, then by Thursday, Friday, you start having, and Saturday night or Saturday, you again fall. Okay, then again Sunday morning, you're like, oh God, please forgive me, one more chance, Lord, please, please. But in the process, what is actually happening is, there's a spiritual weakness taking place. Okay, you don't feel like getting up to say an exhortation. You don't even feel like starting a church, going to church. Okay, or you're like, what is the use? I'm going to sin. Okay, Lord, where is the salvation? Where is the freedom? Where is all that? That thoughts came, and then you might have been a very active leader. And Satan knows exactly where to touch you.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
and then the Bible says you soar like an eagle, but we don't even creep like a mouse. Okay, so that is that spiritual weakness danger when we come to that habitual addiction cycle. As you told, stopping it at that point, understanding where we are going. Like one thing about addiction, I was saying about dopamine and all that. So there is a dopamine you need each level, it goes up and up and up. So initially it would have been just some lingerie or something of that sort which was giving you a kick. Then later goes on to some other levels and levels and levels and levels, and reaches a stage in which even normal sexual acts, what pornography is, doesn't matter to you anymore. You don't get that kick. Then finally you start going into, I don't know whether to use those terms, but more vulgar types of acts, more brutal types, more people involved in that sexual act, more groups involved. You go to dormitory types or various different varieties. You say, I think that is a point to really check in your life. I am addicted.
Yeah.
Because no more is the normal giving me any fix.
Yeah.
Okay, I need a higher level. So I think that is also a checkpoint.
Yeah.
Okay, when
For
you
sure.
go from the softish, the kissing scenes, the caressing scenes, and going into sexual act scenes, and from there going on to the bigger modalities of it, the novelty behind it, the variety behind. Yes, that is maybe out here today. You can just check. Am I into those?
Yeah.
Am I watching those?
Yeah.
So if it is the high time to stop, because next step goes to brutal activities, acting it out.
Yeah.
So each point, as you were saying, that there is an escalation which is taking place. And then finally you reach a rock bottom in which there is a psychological events taking place, there is rejection, self-denial, low self-esteem, as you were saying, even suicides. Loneliness to that extent, don't want to see people at all, work getting affected, academics getting affected. So the whole rock bottom brokenness, death can take place. Death in spiritual, psychological, that sort of sense, no hope anymore. But that is where you were saying to bring in that hope of Christ, that without me you can do nothing. So to understand that phrase there means a lot. Nothing can separate you from the love which Christ has for us. Even you can't. Even your sin can't. Yes, you might feel the indifference part that God says, like, I won't hear your prayers. Yes, but all the disciplining, Bible says clearly, I will discipline you because you are my child. Not because you are somebody else, but because you are my child. We discipline our own children. So definitely God, for that restoration to take place. So what you said is very correct, in which that spiraling process, to think maybe at that thought process, no, just okay, fine, now I am at a difficult stage. Okay, now I am acting it out. I told in the last, maybe rubbing a partner. Rubbing in the sense wanting to touch, that desire to just rub shoulders with, traveling in public transport and consciously, and then say, oh sorry, it was the brake, oh sorry, it was that, but you know deep inside what you did. So if you are living in that spiral, yes, there is a way out.
Just adding on to that, there's this illustration that has stuck with me when it comes to battling with sin, right? And maybe we'll dwell on it a little more in detail later. But the illustration is very simple. There is sin. Assuming there's a thin line of sin. The cross and holiness is on the other end of this chasm, right? And we are often stuck at this line, trying to figure out how much I can step on the other side of righteousness and commit sin without. And I'm just battling with sin here on this end, while the cross is on the other end. When it says looking unto Jesus, it literally means running towards Jesus. And once you switch your perspective from just battling sin and replacing that with pursuing holiness, this becomes like you start looking at it differently. You know, and I think when I was just trying to think about when does a lapse become a relapse? It's when you stop fighting sin for what it is and start running here. That's when lapses wouldn't matter, because you know what really matters, you know what your aim is. If you're still stuck here battling sin, that's a relapse. That's just
somebody, I was reading Ellie Maxwell, one book which he has written. It says born crucified. Okay, imagine a birth process but stuck on the cross. Okay, we always read that verse, okay, take up your cross and follow me. He is going to the next stage, you're born itself crucified. Why? To death, to suffer. To make sure that your journey in this world of wilderness is with struggles, with lot of evil, but you're born crucified itself. So definitely there are going to be struggles.
So I think we'll have to wind up because
you wanted to add something.
Like you were talking about how we should. In the end of the day, let's not try to deceive us, because you hear a lot of people who say, I watch it, but I'm not addicted to it, right? But then, don't deceive yourselves. The first step is denial. Always, that's a telltale sign whether you're struggling with something. So, let's not fool ourselves. Like,
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
not deceive ourselves. That's the worst kind of deception that you can ever
Yeah,
do. So that's, I just wanted to say
Yeah,
that.
so in the addiction cycle, just wanted to tell all of us, right? Like we have thoughts, we have choice points. If you are going to more brutal sexual, it's a warning for us, right? And just want
Brutal or variance?
Yeah, variance, yeah. And at the end of the day, just want to remind us that of the adulterous woman, right? When she came to Jesus, right? Jesus did not condemn her,
Yeah.
right? And Jesus will, when we come back to Him every time, He will not condemn us, right? And there's no condemnation, right? But He says later to her,
Sin no more.
yeah, leave your life of sin,
Yes.
right? And God really wants us to leave this, right? He wants us, let it not be a habitual sin, right? And if you're struggling with it, these are tips that we're giving, but make the choice. Make the choice.
It
every
prevents
time.
you from that great spiritual heights which
Yes.
was meant for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You would still want to just fly down in a
Yes.
lower level, but maybe Christ had a greater plan,
Yes.
which you are trying to jeopardize.
Yeah. So encourage all of us to take this seriously. You know, let's not play around with it, like Benji said. Let's take it seriously and let's decide to get rid of it. Right? Let's put death to sin. Right, and that's what the word says. And let's do that. And we have one more episode, I think. And,
Hopefully it's one more.
hopefully it's one more, and we'll talk about some ways how we can get rid of it. Some active. Even we have talked about before, but we'll do that. Thank you so much for listening to us, and make the right choice.
See you guys.